Is this it? Is this how it ends? Did it even matter? The sweat, the blood, the early mornings and long nights. Did it all really lead to this? Is this all I get? Is this all I got? Nah, it can't be it. This thing ain't over. I might get hit. I might get knocked down. But I won't stop. I won't quit. I have to fight. Not because I'm afraid of losing, but because of what's inside of me. It's what I was made for. I fight like I know I've already won. Because I can't win if I don't fight.
It is a privilege to serve a church that values people, that values our team. I want you to know something. Rest doesn't come easy for me. I suck at this. I'm terrible at resting. I'm okay. I'm good at like being lazy. Don't get me wrong. Like I could stay in pajamas and binge watch Netflix all day. That would be okay with me. Like I can do that stuff. But when I'm ready to go, especially when I get something, kind of wild about it, man, I'm balls to the wall, hair on fire until it's over. Okay, that's in the Bible. You check it out. No, seriously, it's in there. I think it's in Revelation. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm just kidding. So anyway, but like just that's not natural for me. That's natural for me. What's that? Okay, but man, like resting, taking time away is not natural for me, and it's work for me to choose to find time away. And I mean, even talking about this whole idea, I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm okay. Everything's fine. But as a leader, and those of you who get this, I mean, like if you burn the candle at both ends, most of the time you're going to find out it's your family, it's your kids, it's your wife, your husband that's holding the candle, and you're burning it at both ends, and they're the ones getting hurt. And so often it doesn't come out to our attention until we need it. I want you to know something. God designed us. I'm just learning this, okay? God designed us for rest. Now listen, I've been a pastor now, we've been in ministry our entire married life, been 22 years. I was in ministry for several years before Sheila and I met. In fact, I met her while we were in ministry. I've been around this thing for a long time. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back at all, but I'm somewhat well aware of how this thing works. And I try to do everything I can to live life by what God's word has to say. But here's the funny thing about it. Like, it's one of the top 10. It's one of the 10 commandments to rest. I suck at this. Like, if you look at like these commandments, now listen, you would never let a guy be your pastor if he was like constantly having another God before God, right? Or if he was consistently in his life making idols. If I were worshiping idols, you'd probably fire me, right? Please fire me, okay? And so, but like if I were an adulterer, you'd be like, no, that's not how this works, right? But here's the deal. We have a tendency to say, no, there's high regard for at least the top 10, right? At least the 10 commandments. But then what do we do when somebody works hard, works their fingers to the bone, never rests, especially in leadership? We have a tendency to look at people who work tirelessly, and instead of looking at them going, hey, that's not the way it should be, we look at them and say, man, that's awesome. They're great guys. They're leadership. So we wind up honoring the people who dishonor God's word, right? If we have people who murdered or committed adultery, they say, we're like, no. But yes, you can work your fingers to the bone. If we had people who coveted their neighbor's donkey, then you can maybe that has a whole different connotation today, but the problem is we had these people, we would say, no, you're not allowed to do that, but you can work all you want and totally disrespect what is the fourth commandment. Look at in the book of Exodus, chapter 20, verse 8. It says this: remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week to do your ordinary work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath, and it's dedicated to the Lord your God. Man, I don't know about you, but that hurts, right? That steps on my toes. Now listen, I know that you probably, if you've been around church at all, there are some Christians who are like super legalistic about this idea, and that's not what we're talking about. He says to remember the Sabbath day, set aside a day to rest. Resting is important. Now, we're going to unpack a little bit over the next little bit is really just what I'm learning, okay? Now, so this isn't going to come across super motivational. It's not going to come off. It's not funny. I really struggled with it because there's nothing funny about this. But it's really just but the honest side of things that I'm figuring out. Some of this has been working with our counselor, just kind of working through this stuff. Some has just been studying God's word. But I had to have, for me, a definition of what Sabbath is. Because that word, I look it up and I'm like, what is Sabbath? And the word comes from the same place we get the number 7. So you get kind of this like seventh, and we know about Jesus, not Jesus, we know about God in creation. He creates for 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. And we know that this is the Sabbath day and that kind of stuff like that. But what does it really mean? And so I kind of put together a working definition for us. This isn't maybe a complete definition, maybe it's not a technical one, but let's just for us today, at least how I'm learning, let's call Sabbath a set aside time to find rest from yesterday and restoration for tomorrow. Sabbath is time set aside to find rest from yesterday and restoration for tomorrow. Now, these are things that I'm just learning, and this is what I'm figuring out in my life. The first thing I've been learning, and this is, like a lot of things in life, I have to learn the hard way. Because this is second service, I can tell whatever stories I want. So, and I'm going to be off for a month, so what do you care? So, I got my driver's license, right? And my mom and dad said, don't speed. Right? You got to keep it on the speed limit. They'll see a kid in a car and they're going to pull you over and they're going to get you a ticket, right? I got my driver's license. I went to work. I got a ticket on the way home. So I have to learn things the hard way. This is the same thing in our life. If you are going to rest, you're going to have to set aside time. The first thing is you have to set aside time. And God does that. So God said, listen, I want you to do all your work in 6 days, but set aside a day for me to rest, because there's something that God really digs about intentionality. God really digs intentionality. So I think it's the reason we have church on Sunday morning, because you don't accidentally wake up at 8, 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, do you? Like, is this not the worst day of the week? You can get up at 6 o'clock all week long, but try to make it to church on time. You know what I'm saying? It's like everything fights against you. You have to be intentional. You can't accidentally show up at church, right? It takes effort. It takes work. God honors our intentionality. Think about it in terms of giving. Those of you who've taken the faith step and beginning toward giving 10% of your income. Sheila and I have been tithers our entire married life. It's difficult to choose to say up front, 90% of my income is more with God's blessing than 100% of my income without God's blessing. It's tough. But there's something that God digs about us setting aside 10% and saying, God, I trust you that I can get more out of this 90% with your blessing than if I did it without it. God digs that stuff, and I don't understand it, but maybe it's just the choice. It's not unlike your marriage. Doesn't your spouse value it when you're intentional about it? Like if they gave away flowers for free with a fill-up, she's not going to really dig those, right? Like if you got gas and they're like, hey, they gave me these flowers, here you go. But if you stopped by Kroger and you bought her $2 worth of garbage flowers, those things are amazing because there's intentionality behind them, right? My wife she hates it when I go get nice flowers or I order them. She likes it when I stop by Kroger and get junky flowers, because junky flowers it's the intentionality that she enjoys. The thing that we have to understand is God is very much the same way. Our intentionality is valuable to him. I think God put this together. Another thing I'm learning is that it kind of operates all in that definition that we set aside time from things because we need to rest from things. I'm not good at this, right? I'm exhausted and I'm like, okay, I got to sleep so that I can get up and do some more stuff, right? And I got to go to bed early because I got to do this in the morning, or I got to get some rest so that I can get up. I tend to run until it's over and then stop and rest for a second as long as I need to and then get back up. Like, here's a case in point, right? We've been doing some kitchen painting our cabinets. That'll test your marriage, right? But we've really done good. I was just telling you, I'm so proud of us. We tore down all the cabinets, sanded them all down. painted them, did the whole thing, and we didn't fight one time. It was amazing. I was so thrilled. I feel like, okay, but like it's a big deal. So we're doing this work, right? And we're doing this, and I'm like, no, I got to get it finished tonight. So I'm hanging the doors at the last minute. It's 11 o'clock at night. Now listen, all night long, I've been sweating and working, and so I'm trying to drink a lot of water because I got to speak in the morning and all this other stuff. So I'm like, I got these, the bottles of water, and I went to Starbucks, and I got the Via, lime refreshers, and toward the top of them, I thought it was like a way to flavor the water. I had no idea that stuff had caffeine in it until about 3 this morning, after about 6 of those last night. And so I'm just like, shake it up, shrug it, go back to work, and I'm like, at 2 o'clock this morning, I'm like this, huh? Where are we going? And it's just crazy. But, I have a tendency to go to bed at the last minute, sleep, because I want to recover just really quickly. But the truth is, that's not rest from. That's recovery. That's just me trying to put a Band-Aid so that I can keep going, so I can keep doing the same thing. But the problem is sometimes, as Christians usually do, we have a tendency to take something and we run to extremes. We're like, oh, well, God said we got to protect the Sabbath. And so we're going to protect the Sabbath. And so as they did in that day, right? In Jesus' day, they started putting numbers on it. Like, you can take 39 steps, you can do this, but you can't do that. Jesus got in trouble for healing sick people on the Sabbath. And so people get kind of wrapped up around the idea of taking rest, and they kind of get they abandon it completely. But Mark reminds us, this is so important, that Jesus says this. He said to them, the Sabbath was made to meet people's needs, the needs of people, not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. I mean, that's an important thing for us to understand, that you and I were created not to meet the needs of the Sabbath or to do the right things and check the boxes, but you and I were given the Sabbath to meet our needs. God designed us to rest from the things that we experience. Our lives are difficult. They may not be as difficult as people on the other side of the world. They may not be as difficult as some people but the reality is that you and I have difficult and tiring lives. You know why? Because God designed it that way. We work and we need to find rest in Him. That's a powerful idea. What is it that you need rest from? I've been writing out things that stress me. I don't want to write them out because I don't want you to think it was you. But what is it you need rest from? I don't want to say mine out loud, but what is yours? What do you need rest from? There are some things in your life that exhilarate you. I love to speak. This doesn't bother me at all. Now, after I'm done with it, I'm exhausted. But I love getting ready for it. I love the process of it. I love everything about getting on it. I love speaking and clarifying God's words for people and speaking it. That doesn't exhaust me. There are some parts of ministry that exhaust me. But what is it that you need rest from? Is there part of your job or part of the family or part of your responsibilities that you're like, man, this is where I need to find shelter? Is it interactions in some ways where you need rest from? What is it that you need rest from? This isn't like this. I'm not asking for you to answer out loud. That would be weird. But seriously, ask that of yourself. What parts of your life do you need rest from? And then this question that goes with it, and man, this was really helpful for me when I started figuring this out. What is restful to you? What is restful to you? So figure out what you need to rest from, and then find out what's restful to you. I realized working through this that mowing the lawn is pretty restful to me. I don't know why, because it's hot and it's bumpy, and I'm always doing something, and I got to dress differently for it, but I enjoy it, at least in part because it starts a mess, and I get out there and I can do it, right? And then when I'm finished, I can check it off. Things that are restful to me are things that have like an end point, where there's for me, it's restful to check a box and go, that's finished. I'm done, and I can do that. I also like to work with my hands, because ministry, I don't know if you know this or not, because if we've talked to her at all, you can know this, but in ministry, I can't force things to happen, right? But doggone it, if a piece of wood doesn't work, I will cut it, and if it doesn't work, we'll throw it away. I'll go get another one and force that one to work, right? If all else fails, there's a hammer, okay? So, and I've tried it in counseling, but hammers don't work very well, right? So some of you might get one. No, I'm just kidding. But the thing is that some of those things where like working with my hands, that's restful to me. I find some rest in that. It's not just about keeping my pajamas on and binge watching Netflix or goofing off all day or just lounging around. No, listen, I love to do those things, right? I am the perfect example of Isaac's rule, the laws of motion, right? An object at rest will tend to stay at rest until what? Until acted on by his wife. So like who will say, baby, it's time to get up. I'm like, baby, it's been only, I'm just still waking up. She's like, it's been 2.5 hours, get out of bed. So, but the thing is that we have a tendency to only find rest. Now here's the problem. When we just find rest, this is huge to me and I'm just learning this. When we find rest that doesn't offer us restoration, then all we did was find relief. Rest without restoration, it's just relief. Relief is dangerous. It's a big deal for us to understand this. Relief is dangerous. It's not sin, it's dangerous. We have a tendency to run to something to take the edge off, don't we? We have a tendency to run and have a drink or two or three to quote unquote, right, take the edge off. Here's a rule of thumb for me. This is not me saying this is how you have to act. This is me saying how I act. If I've had a stressful day, whether it's been something that's out of my control, something I did that messed up, something that's going on, if I've been under pressure and stress, for that night, I won't have. I don't think there's a problem with having a beer. I don't think it's a problem to have a drink. So that's not my issue. But if I've had a stressful day, I come home and I wouldn't have anything to drink for the night. Because I don't ever want to run to something to take the edge off. Because here's the problem. Relief is dangerous. If we're running to something to find relief, it winds up, the problem is it takes the edge off for a minute, right? But what happens when the relief wears off? The edge is still there. We have to run to things, we have to run to Jesus to find restoration, wholeness, completeness. We have to find restoration. When we find restoration, that's when it becomes valuable. Look at what Matthew has to say. Jesus is saying to these people, he says, come to me, right? He says, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens. Now, no show of hands, but do you carry a heavy burden? I understand. Because it gets too much to bear sometimes. He says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy burden. Do you have preschoolers at home? Then you by all means carry a heavy burden. Do you have teenagers at home? Not killing them is a heavy burden, okay? So, but like, all of you who are weary and heavy burden, and I will give you rest. Jesus offers us rest, but look at what he says. Beyond that, it's not just I'm going to give you a rest, I'll give you a timeout, right? Where you just run off. Remember when you were a kid and you hated getting timeout? Don't you wish as an adult somebody would just put you in timeout? I would love to just go sit and stare in the corner. Like, I'm good, man. This is fine with me. But Jesus doesn't say, I'll give you rest and then just take his hands off of it. He offers something else. Listen, take my yoke upon you. Doesn't that seem a little weird? You're like, hey, I don't want a burden. When we run to something for just relief, what do? We drink it, or we run to this thing, we do whatever it is, we find relief. We run to that thing that we find relief in, and here's the problem. We want to just offload. And the problem is that when we offload, we go out and we just make more load, right? We just unload all this stuff. And this is the problem sometimes that I deal with at times when people won't take advice. You're talking with them, you're working on, they're like, here's all my garbage. And they dump it out and they're like, thanks, I feel a ton better. And then they go out in the car and they make more garbage, Like they come back on. Now I'm carrying their garbage and they're carrying their garbage. That wasn't what we went into this for. Jesus says, listen, here's the deal. I want to trade with you. Come to me, you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. He says, take my yoke upon you. Now, that's a weird phrase. You take my burden. I'm like, no, you're Jesus. I don't want your burden. Hold on a second. What he says, let me teach you, because I am humble and of gentle heart, and you will find rest for your souls. You'll find restoration. You'll find rest that is at a deep level. Man, I gotta be honest with you. The church is the least restful place on the planet because we make it okay for messed up people. right? We are all messed up people. And it's tough at times to find restoration in a place like this. But what Jesus offers us, and this is the difference between rest and restoration. He says this about this yoke thing. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. Now listen to what he says. It's not the weight of it that's light. The burden is light. You know, when we pile stuff on in life, you're going to work and you're like, oh, I'm fine. And we just run away and we find relief for a second. We drink a little bit or we take a nap or we do something. We're like, I can do more now. And then we go back out after it. And then we're like, okay, I got to do this. Okay, I'm going to just find a little something, knock the edge off, and I kind of pile a little bit more on. What we wind up with is like this lopsided burden where parenting has so much pressure on us and it's not organized well. And those of you who've carried a preschooler, you know, like when they get to that place, like when they're an infant, you bundle them up, you make the baby burrito, you know, and you like tie them up super tight so they can't move their hands, you know. And it seems cruel, but it seems cuddly at the same time. But when they're, you ever tried to carry like a 4-year-old and they're squirming all over the place and their arms are on the back. The next thing you know, their leg is on top of your head and you're trying to figure out, how did this even get this way? And you're like, I just want to put you down and they just let you go. And so you wind up with that like baby leash, you know? So you're like, I don't know, just control yourself for 2 minutes, you know? But the problem is that's how we deal with life. Life gets so heavy to us and awkward and hard to carry. And what Jesus offers us is his yoke that's perfectly balanced. Understand what the difference is. The difference between rest and restoration, the difference between relief and being restored is going to Jesus and letting him reorganize the load. He says my burden, the burden I will give you is light. My yoke is easy. He doesn't say it's simple. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. It's well balanced, it's fitted for you. It's able to be carried reasonably by you. Have you ever wondered this? Look at this. God created the whole world in 6 days. I mean, it's a beautiful place, not West Tennessee, but most of it is beautiful, okay? Like some parts of it, in Arkansas is not beautiful either, but like East Tennessee, beautiful, right? I mean, you got the Smoky Mountains. You got like Connecticut is beautiful in the fall. Like the unbelievable like explosion of colors. Like the Grand Canyon. I hear it's beautiful. It takes too long to drive there, so we haven't been there. But like the California, the coast is beautiful. I've been to the Gulf. It's beautiful, right? Been to the Bahamas. It's unbelievably beautiful. But what about places like Fiji and Hawaii and all these unbelievable places that are just objectively unbelievable. And that's not even really talking about, that's a scratch in the surface of the world. Now let me ask you this question. God created all of that, this unbelievable land of beauty. And he gives you roughly 80 plus years, 85 years, you know, to live on this planet. And then in all of his sovereignty and all of his wisdom, he says to you, I need you to sleep for a third of that. Wait a minute, you only give me 80 years here and you want me to sleep? You put me in a coma for a third of it? And then I gotta stop 3 times a day to eat stupid meals, you know, and then I gotta remember to breathe in and out, and I gotta drink water all the time. Wouldn't it be easier? Wouldn't it have been, if God just wanted you to go all the time, wouldn't he have just given you an 85-year body with like a couple of double A's in the back, wound you up and gone, you just go nuts, man, enjoy it all, zoom, and let you go, right? But he doesn't. He creates us with a rhythm of our life to find restoration. We need to find sustenance. We have to stop every day and sleep. We have to stop 3 times, 2 times, 1 time a day at least to eat, right? And if you're on that keto diet, that's not eating, okay? I'm sorry. That's not eating. You people need to learn how to eat. Shorten it to 78 years, who cares? All right, so, but the thing is that, like, we've got to find this stuff. You understand what's going on? God put in us a rhythm of rest. We have to sleep, we have to eat, we have to drink water, we have to breathe over and over and over again. And what he's saying to us is the same thing he says in this verse. He says, listen, come to me when you're weary and heavy burdened, because I want to give you rest. I want to be your rest. You understand what's going on? Is that God designed you and I, God designed us to need him to restore us. So understand something. The only difference between rest and restoration is Jesus. I mean, understand that was Jesus' agenda in the first place, John 10:10. We talk about this verse all the time. The thief came to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus said, I came so that you might have life, a rich and satisfying, abundant, restored life. So man, I'm not very good at this thing, you know? I got to be honest. I mean, the whole first service is the most awkward thing I ever talked. I'm like, here, let me talk to you about rest. And I was looking at it, this is not where I live yet. This is where I'm learning to live. And to be honest with you, I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at resting. I'm terrible at stopping. I'm terrible at intentionality. But if we're going to walk with God, if we're going to serve Jesus as a life, then we have to find a rhythm of rest. And the funny part about it is it gives us the 10 Commandments, for crying out loud, and you'd think I'd have noticed it, right? You'd think I'd have, at some point, said, man, this is a good idea. I should rest before I have to. But man, it's tough. It's way easier to find relief. So what is it you run to for relief? I mean, where are you running for relief? Is it drinking? Do you run to like Netflix and just like, oh, I just got to turn it on and zone out? Or do I turn the game on and then just kind of relief for 20 minutes? What is it that you run to for relief? Man, is it something broken? Is Jesus not even on the radar, and really the enemy has stolen this idea of relief, and now you're drinking too much, or you're using porn, or you're using anger or these other things to find relief? Understand something. Relief is dangerous ground. We've got to understand that. In Sabbath, we find rest from yesterday, and we find restoration for tomorrow. See what happens when we come to Jesus, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. He says, take my yoke upon you. When we do that, we position ourselves in a way where we can rest and be restored and find new strength for tomorrow. I got to be honest with you, there's a little part of me that goes, man, I don't get it. There's a little part of me that feels like, do I really need that? Do I really need time away? Do I need time off? Do I need a break? Because like yesterday, came up here to get the garbage from the building and take it up to the thing, because the guy who normally does that is on vacation this week, and so I came up here and loaded it up, and I took it up there, and I was talking to the guy at the drop-off station, and I was throwing the bags of garbage up there, and the guy was telling me, he's like, man, I was like, man, you almost done for the day? He goes, man, I got off 6 here, but then I got to be at my other job at 6:30. I'm like, man, where are you working there? He tells me, and he's like, I'll get off of there at 2. I'll get to go to sleep by 3. And I'm like, man, here's me. I take a 30-day break from my job, and a job I love, honestly. And I feel a little bit undeserving. I feel a lot humbled by it. But to be honest with you, man, I hope not just a rest from yesterday. I want to find restoration for tomorrow, because what we're anticipating for the fall, what we're anticipating for the next years of Journey Church is something where we've got to understand that we've got to have our A game on. We can't come in kind of like with the edge rubbed off and try and figure this out. All of us, every last one of us, we're all in this mission together. We have to establish rhythms of rest so that you and I can find not just relief, not just rest, but restoration for tomorrow, because what God's calling us to is vital. We can't lose sight of this. This isn't about sleeping in. This isn't about just catching a couple Z's and laying on the beach for a minute. This is about us finding restoration in Jesus. Let me just challenge you with this. What do you need rest from? What do you find restful? What are you running to for relief? And let me ask you this final question. Are you willing to establish a rhythm of restoration in your life so that God can use you in an unbelievable way tomorrow?